Hi, I'm Nate, and you're watching Photolearningism. Thank you so much for joining in. You may have noticed, if you've been following this channel, that I've been doing some over holistic views of things, trying to take a look at images across several different tools all at once, so you can kind of get a good sense of what that looks like if you were to try out this versus that one. We've done a lot of different comparisons. We've done versus. We've done all these different things. We've looked at all these different products and many others as well. So if this is your first time, please don't hesitate to go back and check. I do a lot of work on this channel to build a community of learning so we can help each other and surface products, whether they're commercial or open source. I just want to find the good value that's out there, the most powerful and effective tools, so that you can know about them and that we can be stronger together. So for this particular episode, I wanted to look at Paint.net and Krita and GIMP and focus on the concept of cloning, or really photo correction. That's how we're going to be applying it, with the idea of cloning. So you can see there's been a lot of questions about how it actually works, what keys do you press, and really how does the technique work. I've shown a lot of demonstrations of this but never really explained it in detail. I touched on it when I was surfacing the concept of making your own photo stitchings within Paint.net as well as other tools using this technique, but I'm going to step through it very carefully today so you can see how it is and see if it's something that would be of value to you. Let's get started. All right, so I'm going to jump right into it here. I'm going to start out in Paint.net PDN, which is where I actually started my my photo journey for the most part. It is actually a very, very well-grounded tool, and it works in Windows. I'm sorry, Linux. I'm sorry, Mac. It's built for Windows, and I come from Windows. That's my background, and that's really what I was knowledgeable with. So that's where I started. If you're on Windows as well, it's a very, very, very well-designed tool for doing a lot of very powerful things. Some might say that it's simple, and maybe for some things, yeah, I would agree. However, it is very extensible, it's scalable, and it has a very, very well-invested community behind it who are constantly building onto it, adding plugins and things. There are hundreds of add-ons and things that make this a very interesting tool and a very active tool. So that's where we're starting, Paint.net on the Windows side of things. This is a picture I took, and just to kind of give you a sense of what am I going to do, I'm going to start by looking at this other doorknob in the background here. And maybe if I had taken this picture and thought, well, maybe I don't really like the idea that there are two doorknobs here, and I could have refocused and centered the picture better to do that, but it's after the fact. I have the picture, I got to work with what I have, so let's just pretend that I don't want that other thing there. And it could be anything. It could be a blemish on the door, it could be a person, or maybe a finger that ended up in there. Just use your imagination there. So using that as a premise, I'm going to jump here to the clone tool in Paint.net. It's this kind of rubber stamp looking thing. It has different names and different tools, and here it's called the clone stamp. And I'm going to start by setting the brush a little bigger. And actually, I'm also going to make a secondary layer because it's just good to have a fallback. Paint.net does not have the concept of snapshotting yet, which other tools have invested in. So it's always good to make extra backup layers. That's my practice here for that. So doing that, let's hop into the layer here and let's start looking at this. Yeah, the reason we can't see the brush is because this is a very high-res raw image. And I want to start with something kind of mid-sized. I like to work with a little less hardness. If it's too sharp, the technique I'm about to show you becomes very obvious. You have to allow a little blending, a little finesse to make this work. This will be a little simpler because the background is blurry. You can borrow parts from around the door and kind of blend it in nicely. So I'm going to cut that down to about 60% to start. And I'm going to start with, in this case, with a brush size of about 550, which sounds huge, but the resolution of the picture is quite large, so that's why it doesn't look that big. So I'm going to look at the door, and we're going to eliminate this, and I'm just scoop up a little bit here. I'm going to start by pressing Control left click, and you'll notice how the cursor changes just slightly as I do that, and it leaves a circle behind. That is now the space that I'm going to start with, and as I begin to make alterations, you'll notice how that second circle now begins to follow, it is actually going to borrow respective to where I marked it and clone based on that. So that is why we try to pick a good starting spot. I'm going to trim this down even more because it's a bit too intense yet. You may have to recenter. Control left click and continue to borrow from spots because you may not want to blend based on everything that you're seeing. But you can kind of get a sense of what's going on here, that as I work my way down, this is starting to disappear. And we can borrow the same concept over here. If I were to select carefully this space and then just start drawing my way down. You got to be careful because you might borrow things that you don't want. So you have to recenter again and then just start to draw through these pieces. And you may have to adjust your brush size and work a little bit with that. You may want to at times increase the size of your brush and lower the hardness because again, this is a technique about kind of blending in with what's there. So you may have to borrow from around a little bit and actually re-achieve that gradient without that object there. But that really is the premise of what I'm doing here, is that, again, you're borrowing the pictures and the lines and the pieces that are already a part of the picture, and you're using that, you're borrowing that to draw over on top to essentially erase the parts that you don't want. So I'm just going to do this a little further here so you can again continue to see what this is going to do. And then we'll move on to one of the other tools here. There we go. So you can already see how that is disappearing. That is the idea here. It will work with a lot of different things. I could, if I wanted to get very careful and meticulous, I actually could, to a degree, work on that here, just to give kind of a more detailed example, where let's say I wanted to work on some of these star parts a little bit. And I could very, very carefully achieve that as well. It depends on how much patience you really have for this sort of thing. And that's really what it comes down to. And you can kind of see how this is looking like it's carrying through. Maybe I wanted to achieve something a little different here, where I wanted to get rid of these stars, or I wanted to have a different look. Maybe I wanted to tighten this up a little bit. Continue this out. Again, you'll notice how the brush follows, and that gives me this easy approach where I can replicate as I go. So that's a way to do this, and it works very well. Okay, so looking at it now in Krita. The way things work in Krita, different from Paint.net and really different from a lot of tools, is that they do have the tool panel, usually along the left for this particular workspace. They tend to think in terms of brushes. A lot of their working tools outside the standard things, the resize and all of that, those fall into the brush category, and particularly the clone brush. So that is where it is, and once you understand that and know that, really everything else is the same for Krita. What I'm going to do, I mentioned there's the Snapshot Technique for Krita and other things to kind of take a moment in time in case we really don't like where we ended up. I'm going to do that. Give ourselves a rollback period. And I'm going to make the same adjustments that we talked about, like in Paint.net. Make the brush a little bigger. Bring down the opacity quite a bit. Control-click to set our starting point. All right. And away we go. Same kind of idea. I may need to increase the opacity just a little bit. Paint.net is a little bit more aggressive with its hardness, just so you're aware. The other tools have a lot more attention to softness in that, so they don't have to be quite so pointed. So you can see how the same idea works in Krita doing this idea. GIMP. Okay, so again, the tools are oriented a little bit differently, but the principle is the same. We're going to use the clone tool up here. May have to play with the sizing, may have to play with the hardness a little bit down here, but again, these concepts are all the same. Control-click, and you can see that in principle, it's same idea. we're just going to back off the hardness even more. And this is the idea. Work our way around and make it be gone. So again, same idea. You can get really complex with this, really detailed in a lot of ways. You can use it to correct, continue, or really somewhat enhance, as I demonstrated in Krita a little bit, with what's there. You can draw details over, and that works particularly effectively with trees if you have to draw out tree branches and replicate them and recreate parts of a tree, which gets a little fun. You can do that. It does take some more subtle detail, very careful handwork, but it can be done, and I've done it. So that's really the whole idea. Very, very simple example here. Again, just demonstrated that you can make this work in any of these tools, and really this is not an uncommon thing to find in most photo and graphic tools. I'm using this for a photo I took, so that's really the application that I'm proposing here, or for post-image corrections like this. But you could use this really in graphics. You could use this wherever appropriate. I presume with most graphics that you'd still have the layers and you'd have that option available to you, but it certainly would be available. This is mostly for a medium where you've taken a shot and the layers are not an option because it's a flat picture. So that is the idea. Again, thank you so much for joining in. I hope this was helpful and really helped to flesh out the questions and the details of how to do cloning, how to do photo correction. This is a very basic example, but I did try to give some more finer details earlier in the video. So go ahead and play with those. And again, in your photo tool of choice, leave any questions and really leave any conversation relevant to family-friendly discussion in the comments. It's really great to see comments coming in and have things to talk about and talk about art with the rest of you. That's great. Give me a thumbs up if this was helpful. Consider subscribing so you don't miss out on the awesome projects that are up on the horizon. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you so much.